Hi, I'm Becca.
And I'm Ceci.
Welcome to What If You Knew, the Red Flag series where we help you avoid getting stuck in toxic relationships and tell you what you need to know to be the kind of person who attracts the kind of person you want.
In Red Flags 1, we talked about how some people are good at pretending to be someone they aren't.
And we talked about how it can be hard to see red flags if the person you're dating has learned how to manipulate others.
Well, this time we're going to go through the different kinds of manipulation tactics so that you can be aware of them and be able to identify them, but also so that you can take a look at yourself to see if you've ever used them, because sometimes we're manipulating without even realizing it.
And since it's so important to recognize manipulation when it's happening, today we're just going to focus on the different tactics. We'll get into why people manipulate next time in Red Flags 3. In order to avoid confusion, we're going to define the difference between worth and value. When Ceci and I talk about value, we're talking about the impact another person has on your life, for good or for bad. Do they help you? Do they hurt you? When we talk about worth, we're talking about the innate worth of every human being. We are all equal when it comes to our worth. Put simply, value can change, worth cannot.
So we all know that some relationships are healthier than others. And what's the difference? A relationship is healthy if both people know these three things. You'll be able to tell not just by the way they interact with each other, but also by the way they interact with other people.
Okay, Ceci, let's go over those three things.
First, they know that a person's worth never changes. Second, they know that they can only change themselves. And third, they choose to change when they realize they can improve.
When at least one person in a relationship doesn't understand those three important things, there's manipulation going on in that relationship. One partner or the other, sometimes both, will be doing and saying things with the intention of leading the other person to think or to feel or to act in a way that they wouldn't have if the manipulation wasn't present. For whatever reason they're doing it, the intended outcome is control.
Right. Manipulation is no joke. So Becca's not going to get very many chances to laugh today.
I know, right? Dang it. But that's okay, because I know this is important. And I know that we need to talk about this stuff so we can recognize when it's happening to us and notice when we're doing it to somebody else.
That's right, because if we can recognize it, then we can change it.
Okay, here we go. If we had to categorize the general behaviors of manipulations, we could put them into 4 categories: avoid responsibility, intimidate and belittle, isolate and trap, and abuse.
As we describe them, try to answer these 3 questions for each one. Has someone else used this on you? Have you ever used it to defend yourself from being manipulated? Or have you used it on someone to get something you want from them?
If you have time right now, pause the video and download the worksheet to help you keep track. You'll find the link in the description. Ceci, it's super interesting to go through this more than once with the different relationships that we're in.
It is. It's fascinating. And it could be with a parent, an ex, a coworker, a boss, your friends, anyone. We'll start with the more obvious manipulations. Manipulating to avoid responsibility.
Blaming. This is when you shift responsibility to someone else for your problem. When you say that the way you're acting or the way you're feeling is someone else's fault, it's blaming.
A common reaction to it is that the victim might take it on themselves to fix things, or they might even take the blame, even though it wasn't their fault, just so they can avoid the negative reaction of the other person.
Chameleon shifting. Isn't this kind of like playing both sides so you always win?
Yeah, people do this when they start to realize they're wrong, and they're not okay with being wrong. So they'll say, that's not what I said, or what I meant was. Basically, they're trying to convince you that you misinterpreted what they said so that they can change their position and still be right.
Changing the rules. As soon as one person gets comfortable in the relationship and thinks they kind of know how the relationship's going to roll and kind of what to expect in the relationship, the other person switches things. They get upset about something that never upset them before, or they say they've never liked something that they've been perfectly fine with up to that point. It's done to keep you off balance. It's a way to control you by keeping you guessing and always working, always trying to figure out how to please them.
Changing the subject is sometimes something that will happen when a person's feeling uncomfortable with what's being talked about. But if they do it to avoid talking about something that's important to you or your relationship, it might be manipulation. They might even make a final statement and then leave to make sure they get the last word.
Copying out. This is basically a lot of rationalizing to avoid taking responsibility for something you did or didn't do.
Now, crying isn't bad, but when someone cries or throws a pity party to make another person feel guilty, then it's manipulation.
Also, if you realize that every time you cry, the other person gives you attention or compassion, then it can be really tempting to use it as a manipulation to get those things.
Right. It all boils down to intent.
Diversionary tactics. This is trying to draw attention away from something you want to avoid talking about, or from something you don't want the other person to see or notice.
Being emotionally dishonest is when you deny that you're feeling something when you're actually feeling it. Sometimes we're not even honest with ourselves, but when we're not honest with someone else, it leaves them feeling super confused.
Excuse making for how you act or what you do.
Faking incompetence is acting like you don't know how to do something or acting like you don't know something when you really do.
Flaw finding. This is watching another person really closely so you can catch them messing up and then use it against them.
The next category is manipulating to intimidate or to belittle someone.
Authoritarian stance. Have you ever had someone get right up in your face, like right up next to you when they want you to do something, or when you're not doing something they want you to do?
People who do this think it's their right, sometimes even their duty, to put you in your place or keep you in your place.
Rude behavior or speech. It can be really hurtful and embarrassing when someone uses loud, harsh language when they're annoyed with us.
And it's also very uncomfortable for anyone who might be around you who's listening. The person's goal is to shut you down and make it clear that you and your ideas don't count. It's a huge indicator that they think you're less important than they are.
Button pushing. When a person knows exactly what to say to upset you, they're button pushing. And they push until you break, and then they turn it around and they end up shaming you for losing control. Ceci, when I see this screen here, that's when it starts getting kind of hard to talk about these things.
Yeah, it is hard. It's really heartbreaking that some people can treat each other in such damaging ways.
It is.
So here we have cruelty. It's when someone has no problem inflicting pain or watching their victim suffer. If someone finds it amusing to be cruel to animals, watch carefully because this is often a precursor to human abuse.
Holding grudges. When someone won't let you forget something you did in the past, they're holding a grudge. It can be something you did wrong, but it can also be something that actually wasn't wrong. It was just something they didn't like.
And they bring it up over and over and never let you forget it. Stalking is consistently watching someone and following them around and messing with them, sometimes to intentionally scare them. If they want you to know that they were close enough to hurt you, they might leave some kind of evidence behind. This manipulation is often a precursor to physical violence.
Sweetness overkill. I think of buttering you up when I see this one. Don't Sims Online kind of do this, does he?
Yeah, it's foolishly overvaluing you, putting you up on this super high pedestal. And it might feel good, but they're doing it because they're hoping to get something they want from you.
Taking the credit. This is taking credit for something that's not yours. You see success in another person, and then you find a way somehow to make it about you.
With terrorizing, the person doesn't only make a threat, they carry it out. They damage or hurt something that you care about. It's incredibly harmful because it makes any threat seem like a real possibility.
You'll recognize verbal barrage when one person is doing all or almost all of the talking. And what they're saying is hurtful, it's demeaning, and it makes you or anyone around you listening really uncomfortable.
Let's move on to manipulating, to isolate, and to trap.
Abusers can't get away with their abusive behaviors if other people are aware that it's happening. Alienation of others is a way to keep the abuse a secret from people that would try to stop it if they knew.
So if someone wants to control you so they can misuse you or they can have you all to themselves, they'll try to isolate you emotionally and physically from anyone who might interfere with that, your friends, family, anybody who cares about you.
Because if they can prevent you for long enough from getting reality checks from the people that care about you, they might be able to convince you that what's happening is normal or not that big of a deal.
Now, most of us are familiar with blackmailing from watching movies. The blackmailer will demand something from you in return for keeping a secret they know about you. It's usually something embarrassing or something that would compromise you in some way.
Confiscation is taking something from you that legitimately belongs to you. Like if a spouse took a cell phone away or a bank card or something special to you, just to get back at you or try to punish you. It's not their property. And no one should be the boss of anyone else in a dating or marriage relationship.
Emotional neglect is when someone stops showing affection or giving praise or any kind of love to you. They want you to worry that they'll leave you. Victims might end up desperately trying to figure out what they can do to make the person happy or at least keep them satisfied so they won't leave. And that's exactly what they want.
Emotional hooks are things someone says when the conversation is over to try to keep the conversation going. Sometimes people use emotional hooks to get your attention when you're busy. The intent is to make you feel guilty for going about your life instead of paying more attention to them. Your time is your time. You get to choose what to do with it.
End run is setting up someone for something they might feel bad trying to get out of, like volunteering someone to do something without asking them first, or asking them something in front of a group of people because they know you'll be too uncomfortable to say no.
When someone really wants something from you and they aren't sure you'll give it to them, they might leverage their request with flattery.
When something is happening that we don't agree with or like, and we aren't comfortable approaching the person in charge about it, we might try to gather an army. We think that if we get a group of people to agree with us and put pressure on the other person, that they'll change whatever it is we don't like.
Having the least interest. This one is something that's actually easy to see. Have you ever seen a couple together and noticed that one of them is very clingy? There's a saying that says something like, he who has the least interest has the most control. A person can act disinterested in you or ignore you once in a while to give you the message that you like them more than they like you. So it's like they have nothing to lose, right? Doesn't matter to me. I don't need this relationship as much as you.
And healthy relationships are not one-sided. They aren't about who has the most power or the biggest say. And the importance of one person doesn't count more than the other. They are equally important. Holding back information is when someone knows something that would help you make a decision, but they don't share it with you because they know that without that information, you'll make a different decision that's in their favor.
Hollow promises. This is making promises you intend to keep at the time, but then when the time comes, you don't keep it because you either can't or you don't feel like it anymore.
Physical isolation has to do with the abuser's need of keeping their abuse a secret. Sometimes they'll play it off as being romantic, wanting to escape to a little paradise and not having to worry about anybody else. We'll just have each other all to ourselves.
And if they can get you and keep you somewhere away from other people where no one will be checking up on you, they can do whatever they want to you.
Monopolizing is when someone demands everything from you, your time, your attention, your space, your emotions, and they leave very little left for you to have relationships with anyone else. And that includes having time for yourself.
When someone's playing the long game, they spend the entire front end of the relationship trying to impress you. As time passes and you see how amazing they are, you're more likely to commit to them.
And you do it quickly because you don't want to lose someone so amazing, right? But as soon as you commit, they don't feel the need to impress you anymore. And you're left feeling cheated. Possessiveness starts with objectification and then jealousy. He's my man or she's my woman, which might seem cute in the beginning, but as time goes on, it can turn into something uglier. It evolves into ownership. I own you. And then the abuse starts.
And the rationalization of this is no one can tell me what to do with my own stuff. I can do whatever I want with it. But the truth is, you're nobody's stuff. You're nobody's property.
Promise in the future sounds like these things. Don't worry, I won't be hanging out with them so much after we get married. I'll spend every night with you, babe.
When we combine our money, I'll be more careful about spending.
I'll be able to start school again when we aren't paying for 2 apartments.
As soon as we start a family, I promise I'll get serious about looking for a better job.
People do this either one, because they're worried you won't like the real them, or two, because they want you to believe they're exactly who you want so that they can trap you into a relationship later.
Relentlessness is like peer pressure on steroids. They won't stop bugging you. They won't stop pressuring you and pushing you until you give them what they want.
Rescuing is okay as long as you're rescuing someone from a situation that will harm them. But it's not a good thing if you're rescuing them when they don't need help, or if you're doing it just hoping that they'll become dependent on you.
Yes, Ceci, and sometimes someone will rescue someone else from a crisis because they have an ulterior motive, which isn't good either.
Suicide threats are no joke. They might be made by a person to express their pain when they want you to understand how much they're suffering. And those people, they're reaching out for help.
Right? But some people will threaten to commit suicide in an attempt to control you. That is never okay.
It isn't. So in dating relationships, report it either way, because it can be hard to tell whether they really need help or whether they're faking it to manipulate you. And if you report it, they'll for sure get the help they need, or at least think twice about using it to manipulate you.
In an abusive relationship, an abuser will sometimes carefully feed false information to people outside of the relationship so that if the victim ever tries to speak out, no one believes them. This is called wiring.
All right, so let's review the forms of abuse we've covered today.
When someone attacks our self-worth, our emotions, our thoughts, that's emotional or psychological abuse.
When someone uses physical means to show power over another person that causes bodily harm, that's physical abuse.
Sexual abuse is when someone pushes your boundaries sexually or forces you sexually. It's not your job to satisfy anyone sexually. Your body belongs to you and only you.
When someone uses religious beliefs or religious authority to control you, it's spiritual abuse.
Verbal abuse is meant to put you in your place, to cause enough hurt or enough fear in you that you won't feel safe standing up for yourself. It's demeaning, and it can leave you feeling like you'll never be good enough.
Now, we know that it can be hard to listen to us talk about some of these manipulations, especially if you've had any experience with any of them in your own relationships. So if you're wondering what drives people to manipulate, we answer that question in the next video, Red Flags 3.
Until then, remember, you can know what to look for and you can know what you're looking at.
Thanks for joining us.